The security footage played on the massive screen, and 15 hardened criminals watched in horrified silence. There she was, the beautiful black woman who graced charity galas in Chanel and diamonds, in the arms of the one man who should have been untouchable. His own right-hand man, his blood brother of 15 years, in his bed, in his mansion. 6 months of betrayal captured in high definition. Kang Dae-jung, the supreme chief of the most feared Korean mafia on the West Coast, the man who commanded an empire worth millions, who had never shown mercy to traitors, stood frozen. Because this wasn't just any betrayal. This was his wife, Amara, the sophisticated black heiress he had married 5 years ago in an arranged alliance, destroying everything he believed in with the only person he had ever truly trusted. The room waited for the execution. The bullet. The blood. That's how betrayal is paid in their world. Always. No exceptions. But Dae-jung couldn't pull the trigger. Because deep in his shattered heart, he knew a devastating truth he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. He had treated this elegant black woman like expensive property, displayed her beauty like a trophy, possessed her, but never truly saw her. And his brother? His brother had given her what he never could. Humanity, recognition, love. What happened next tore apart a criminal empire and forced 3 people to confront the difference between loyalty and possession, between love and ownership, between revenge and redemption. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Los Angeles gleams under the California sun, its skyscrapers piercing the sky like glass daggers. But in the shadows of these monuments to wealth and power, a different world thrives. A world where loyalty is currency and betrayal is death. In this world, one name inspires both reverence and terror. Kang Dae-jung. At 38 years old, Dae-jung stands as the supreme chief of the Baekho organization, the White Tiger, one of the most feared Korean mafias on the entire West Coast. His empire is vast, stretching across 3 states, built on blood, violence, and an iron code of absolute loyalty. Mansions of marble and steel serve as his fortresses, each one a monument to his ruthless climb from the brutal streets to the pinnacle of criminal power. His garage houses a fleet of luxury cars worth millions: Maseratis, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, each one a trophy of conquest. But these material possessions are merely symbols. What truly defines Kang Dae-jung is his unwavering belief in loyalty above all else. He governs with a fist of iron, demanding absolute devotion from every soldier, every captain, every person who dares to enter his orbit. To betray Dae-jung is to sign one's own death warrant, and he has never shown mercy to traitors. Never. His generosity to the loyal is legendary. He treats his faithful men like family, showering them with wealth and protection. But his cruelty to those who betray him is equally legendary. Bodies have been found in alleyways, in dumpsters, floating in the Pacific, all bearing the marks of what happens when someone breaks the sacred code of the Baekho. Dae-jung has 2 unbreakable rules that have guided his entire criminal career: never betray the crime family and never touch another man's wife. These rules are not merely guidelines. They are commandments carved into his very soul. His word is law. His name alone can silence a room full of hardened criminals. But beneath the mask of the merciless chief, beneath the armor of power and violence, lies a vulnerability that Dae-jung has never revealed to anyone. Deep in his heart, in the darkest corners of his consciousness where he refuses to look, lives a fear that has haunted him since childhood. the fear that he will never be loved for who he truly is, only for the power he wields. It is a fear he buries under brutality, under control, under the performance of strength. A fear he will never admit exists. By his side, playing the role of the perfect trophy wife with exquisite precision, stands Amara. She is breathtakingly beautiful, her black skin radiant and flawless, her elegance hypnotic. At charity galas and high society events, this black woman in haute couture turns heads, Chanel dresses that drape perfectly over her curves, diamonds that sparkle against her dark skin, heels that click with practiced grace across marble floors. She smiles for photographers, makes polite conversation with politicians and business moguls, and plays the obedient wife with an actor's skill. But Amara was not always this polished, imprisoned creature. She came from wealth herself, real wealth, earned wealth. The daughter of black real estate magnates from Atlanta, she grew up in a world of privilege and possibility. Her parents built an empire through legitimate business, through intelligence and determination, and they gave their daughter the best education money could buy. Ivy League universities, elite private schools. Amara was groomed to be a leader, a businesswoman, a force in her own right. 5 years ago, everything changed. The marriage was arranged, a cold, calculated transaction between families seeking to strengthen commercial alliances. Daejung needed respectability, needed connections to the legitimate business world, needed a beautiful wife to display at events where a mobster alone would never be welcome. Amara's family needed protection, needed the kind of power that money alone couldn't buy in a world where danger lurked in shadows. So this black woman of sophistication and education became Mrs. Kang. She brought not just her stunning beauty, but her social connections, her polish, her ability to move seamlessly between the criminal underworld and high society. She became the perfect facade for Daejung's operations, the elegant black wife who made the mobster seem almost civilized. But behind the designer clothes and the million-dollar jewelry, behind the practiced smiles and the graceful performances, Amara is dying inside. She has wealth without voice, status without choice, luxury without freedom. Daejung treats her as valuable property, displays her black beauty as an exotic trophy in his collection of expensive possessions. But he never sees her as a woman with thoughts, feelings, dreams. She is furniture. Beautiful, expensive furniture that he polishes and shows off, but furniture nonetheless. For 5 years, this black woman has played her role perfectly, hiding her loneliness behind elegant coldness, burying her pain beneath impeccable posture and calculated smiles. She lives in a golden cage, surrounded by every material comfort, yet suffocating in isolation. Because what is luxury when you are not seen as human? What is wealth when you have no freedom to choose your own path? What is marriage when there is no love, no connection, no recognition of your very humanity? The one person who truly knows Kang Daejung, who sees past the brutal mask to the wounded man beneath, is Min-jae. For 15 years, Min-jae has been Daejung's right hand, his blood brother, his most trusted confidant. They grew up together in the violent streets, 2 hungry young soldiers with nothing but their loyalty to each other and their burning ambition to survive. When everyone else abandoned them, they had each other. When the world tried to crush them, they fought back side by side. Min-jae knows every secret, every vulnerability, every scar, physical and emotional, that Daejung carries. He has seen his chief cry only once, has held him when nightmares of their brutal past came calling, has killed for him without question. Daejung trusts Min-jae with his very life. He trusts him with the passwords to his safes, with the darkest secrets of the organization, with unlimited access to his home and to his wife. It was this trust that created the perfect conditions for the unthinkable. Min-jae has watched Amara for 5 years, this gorgeous black woman trapped in a gilded prison. At first, he saw her as his chief's property, as he was supposed to. But slowly, gradually, he began to see something else. He noticed the sadness in her eyes after formal dinners where she was treated like expensive decoration. He heard the silent tears she cried when she thought no one was listening. He saw the way Daejung touched her, not with affection, but with possession, the way one might adjust a valuable painting on the wall. Casual conversations at the mansion became something more. Polite exchanges became confessions whispered in quiet moments. Compassion became forbidden connection. And Min-jae, the loyal soldier who had killed dozens for his chief without hesitation, found himself feeling something he had no right to feel for this black woman who belonged to his brother. What Min-jae didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Amara felt it too. On a cold winter night, while rain hammered against the windows of the mansion like desperate fingers seeking entry, Daejung traveled to Seattle for crucial business meetings. The house felt emptier than usual. Vast rooms echoing with silence, marble floors reflecting nothing but loneliness. Amara stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, watching the rain blur the city lights below, feeling the familiar ache of isolation settle deeper into her bones. Min-jae was there, as he often was, overseeing security in his chief's absence. He found her there, this beautiful black woman silhouetted against the storm, and something in the moment felt different, heavier, more dangerous. "You seem sad tonight," he said softly, approaching with cautious steps. Amara turned, and for the first time in 5 years, she didn't bother to hide behind her mask of elegant composure. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears. "I'm always sad, Min-jae. I've been sad for so long I've forgotten what it feels like to be anything else." The confession hung in the air between them like a spark near gasoline. Min-jae knew he should leave, knew he should walk away, knew that what he was feeling was a betrayal of everything he believed in, every oath he had sworn to his blood brother. But he couldn't move. He was frozen, staring at this black woman whose beauty had always been untouchable, seeing for the first time not a trophy wife, but a human being drowning in loneliness. "He doesn't see you," Min-jae heard himself say, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Daejung, my brother, he doesn't see you as you are." "No," Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "He sees an object. An expensive, beautiful object. But I am not human to him. I am a possession." What happened next would destroy everything. Min-jae crossed the space between them, and this sophisticated black woman, this prisoner in designer clothes, didn't pull away. Their lips met with desperate hunger, with the need of two people suffocating who had finally found air to breathe. It wasn't empty lust or casual passion. It was two souls who had been performing their entire lives, suddenly finding authenticity, finding humanity, finding the simple recognition of being seen. They made love that rainy night in the very bed Amara shared with Daejung, in the bedroom of the mansion built on blood and loyalty. And with every touch, every whispered word of affection, every moment of genuine connection, they were signing their own death warrants. The affair continued for 6 months. 6 months of stolen moments when Daejun traveled for business. 6 months of encrypted phone calls and elaborate lies. 6 months of meetings in hotel rooms across the city, of rushed encounters in the mansion when opportunity presented itself. They knew it was wrong. God, how they knew it was wrong. The guilt ate at them like acid, corroding their insides even as they couldn't stop reaching for each other. Amara felt shame crushing her chest every time she looked at her husband, but she also felt alive for the first time in 5 years. Min-jae touched her like she was a woman, not a decoration. He asked about her dreams, her fears, her thoughts. He listened when she spoke. He saw her black beauty not as an exotic trophy, but as part of the complete human being she was. And that recognition, that simple act of being seen as fully human, was more addictive than any drug. Min-jae carried different guilt, heavier guilt. He was betraying his blood brother, the man who had saved his life more times than he could count, the man he would die for without hesitation. He had killed for Dae-jung, had bled for him, had sworn eternal loyalty, and now he was sleeping with his wife, touching the one woman who should have been completely untouchable. Every time he looked at Dae-jung's face, saw the trust in his chief's eyes, Min-jae wanted to confess, wanted to beg for the bullet he knew he deserved. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't kill what he felt for this black woman who had become his everything. For the first time in his violent life, Min-jae understood what it meant to love someone so completely that even death seemed like an acceptable price. They were careful, so careful. They used burner phones. They never communicated when Dae-jung was present. They covered their tracks with the precision of experienced criminals. For 6 months, they believed they were safe. For 6 months, they lived in their forbidden bubble, stealing moments of genuine connection in a world built on violence and transaction. But secrets in the criminal world have a way of surfacing, and technology that provides security can also provide surveillance. Everything collapsed on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Dae-jung returned unexpectedly from a business trip to South Korea, his private jet landing hours earlier than scheduled. He wanted to surprise Amara, wanted to present her with expensive gifts he'd purchased in Seoul, jewelry and designer handbags that served as his standard apology for emotional neglect. These gifts were how he showed affection, the only language of love he knew. Expensive objects for his expensive object. The mansion was quiet when he entered. Too quiet. Amara wasn't in any of her usual places. Not in her dressing room, not in the garden, not in the library where she sometimes pretended to read while actually drowning in loneliness. A familiar paranoia crept up Dae-jung's spine, the same instinct that had kept him alive through decades of violent crime. He went to his office and pulled up the security camera feeds. The mansion was wired with cameras in every public space, not in the bedrooms or bathrooms, because even Dae-jung had some boundaries, but in hallways, living areas, entrances. It was standard security protocol, recordings stored on encrypted servers that he reviewed periodically for threats. He started scrolling through recent footage, not looking for anything specific, just checking, just being thorough. Just being the cautious criminal who had survived by trusting nothing and no one completely. And then he saw it. The timestamp read 3 days ago, late evening. The camera in the second-floor hallway captured Min-jae and Amara emerging from one of the guest rooms, her black skin flushed, her hair disheveled, her expensive dress wrinkled. Min-jae's hand was on her lower back, intimate and possessive. They were laughing softly, whispering to each other with the easy comfort of lovers who had done this many times before. Dae-jung's hand froze on the mouse. His heart stopped beating. The world tilted on its axis. No, this couldn't be real. This had to be a mistake, a glitch, something explainable. He scrolled back further, found another clip from 2 weeks prior. The living room camera caught them kissing by the fireplace, Amara's arms wrapped around Minje's neck, his hands tangled in her hair. The kiss was long, passionate, real. Further back, a month ago, security footage from the mansion's entrance showed Minje arriving late at night when Pejung was in Las Vegas. The interior cameras tracked him going directly to the master bedroom. He didn't emerge until morning. Taejung scrolled frantically now, searching through 6 months of recordings with shaking hands. The evidence was everywhere. Dozens of encounters, hundreds of stolen moments, 6 months of betrayal captured in high-definition video, time-stamped and undeniable. His wife, this beautiful black woman he had married, had provided for, had given everything to, in the arms of his blood brother, in his bed, in his home, whispering words of affection to Minje that she had never spoken to him. The supreme chief of the Petco organization, the man who had faced bullets and torture without flinching, the criminal who had built an empire on violence and willpower, collapsed in his office chair. The physical pain would have been more bearable than this. A knife to the gut would have hurt less. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was the confirmation of his deepest, darkest fear. He had never been loved for who he was, only for what he provided. And the 2 people he trusted most in the world, the 2 people who actually mattered to him, had spit on that trust in the most intimate way possible. Taejung sat alone in his office for hours, watching the clips over and over, cataloging every betrayal, every kiss, every moment of connection between his wife and his brother. The rage built slowly, cold and calculating rather than hot and impulsive. Men who acted on impulse died young in his world. But beneath the calculated fury, a storm of emotions he didn't know how to process turned like a hurricane. Pain, humiliation, heartbreak, and something worse. The devastating realization that maybe, just maybe, he had created this himself. For 3 days, Daejung did not act. For 3 days, he watched the recordings obsessively, alone in his office, cataloging every moment of betrayal with the meticulous precision of a man building a case for execution. He barely ate. He barely slept. He simply watched, over and over, as the 2 people who mattered most to him destroyed everything he believed in. His lieutenants noticed the change immediately. The supreme chief was cold, distant, his eyes carrying a darkness that frightened even the most hardened criminals in his organization. Something had happened, something catastrophic, but no one dared ask what. On the 4th day, Daejung finally moved. He convened an emergency meeting of the Petco organization, summoning all 15 captains and top-ranking members to the mansion's conference room. A large space with walls of dark wood and a massive table where life and death decisions were made regularly. He gave no explanation for the meeting, which was unusual. Daejung always explained, always kept his people informed. This silence was terrifying. Minje arrived as he always did, loyal, confident, with no idea that his world was about to end. He took his usual seat at Daejung's right hand, the position of honor reserved for the most trusted advisor. The other men filed in, filling the room with the quiet tension that always preceded important gatherings. When everyone was seated, Daejung stood at the head of the table. His face was a mask of ice. Without a word, he picked up a remote control and activated the large screen mounted on the wall. The video began to play. The room fell into deathly silence as 15 hardened criminals watched their chief's wife, this beautiful, sophisticated black woman, in the arms of their chief's right-hand man. The footage played for 5 agonizing minutes, showing clip after clip of the affair, leaving no room for doubt, no possibility of misunderstanding. Min Jae's face drained of all color. He didn't try to speak, didn't try to deny what was undeniable. He simply stared at the screen, watching his betrayal displayed for the entire organization to witness. When the video ended, the silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Everyone knew what this meant. Everyone knew what had to happen next. The law of the Mafia was clear, had always been clear. Betrayal is paid with blood. No exceptions. Ever. Min Jae, Dae-jung said, his voice eerily calm. Stand up. Min Jae stood on shaking legs. He didn't look at his chief, couldn't bear to see the face of the brother he had betrayed so completely. Do you deny any of what we just saw? Dae-jung asked. No, Min Jae whispered. I don't deny it. Do you understand what you've done? Yes. Min Jae's voice was barely audible. I understand. Then kneel. Without hesitation, Min Jae dropped to his knees on the marble floor. He lowered his head, exposing the back of his neck in the traditional position of execution. He didn't beg for mercy, didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply knelt and waited for the bullet he knew he deserved, had always known he would receive the moment the affair was discovered. The men around the table watched, some with satisfaction, others with shock, all with the understanding that justice was about to be served. Several hands moved toward weapons, ready to carry out the execution the moment their chief gave the order. But Dae-jung didn't give the order. Instead, he said, "Take him to the basement. Chain him. Keep him alive." Confusion rippled through the room. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how betrayal was handled. You didn't keep traitors alive. You didn't give them time to think, to plan, to potentially escape or cause more damage. You eliminated the threat immediately and publicly. But no one questioned the Supreme Chief. 4 men grabbed Min Jae, dragged him from the room toward the mansion's basement. The same mansion where the betrayal had occurred, where he had touched the untouchable woman, where he had destroyed 15 years of brotherhood for 6 months of forbidden love. When Min Jae was gone, Dae-jung addressed the remaining men. The woman will be dealt with separately. This meeting is over. No one speaks of this outside this room. Anyone who does will join him in the basement. The men filed out in silence, but Dae-jung could see it in their eyes. Confusion, yes, but also concern. Hesitation in executing a traitor was weakness, and weakness in a chief was dangerous for everyone. The organization depended on strength, on certainty, on the unwavering application of their code. By keeping Min Jae alive, even temporarily, Dae-jung was showing cracks in his armor. Alone in the conference room, Dae-jung stood staring at the blank screen where moments before his humiliation had been displayed in a high definition. He should have killed Min Jae immediately. Should have put the bullet in his head himself and been done with it. That's what a strong chief would do. That's what the code demanded. But he couldn't. God help him. He couldn't pull that trigger. Because Min Jae wasn't just a traitor. He was the brother who had saved Dae-jung's life in a knife fight when they were 17. He was the friend who had held him when his mother died. He was the only person in the world who knew about the nightmares that still haunted Dae-jung, about the fear of never being truly loved. Killing him should be easy, should be automatic.
But it wasn't. Amara had no idea she'd been discovered. She returned to the mansion that evening from a charity luncheon, looking perfect in her designer dress, her black skin glowing, her makeup flawless. She carried shopping bags from expensive boutiques,
playing her role as the pampered wife with practiced ease. She found Dae-jung waiting in the darkened living room, sitting in an armchair like a king on a throne of shadows. "You're home early," she said, her voice carrying the polite distance that had characterized their marriage for 5 years. "I thought you weren't due back until—" "Sit down, Amara." Something in his tone made her freeze. She'd heard Dae-jung angry before, had heard him furious, had even heard him violent when dealing with enemies. But this was different. This was cold, dead, terrifying in its complete lack of emotion. She sat on the sofa across from him, her shopping bags forgotten on the floor, her heart beginning to race with animal instinct that sensed danger. Dae-jung picked up a tablet from the table beside him and pressed play. The screen illuminated his face with cold blue light as the video began. Video of her and Min-jae, intimate and undeniable. The world stopped. Amara's carefully constructed facade, maintained with such discipline for 5 years, shattered into a million pieces. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the evidence of her betrayal playing out in brutal clarity. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Please, turn it off." Dae-jung let it play for another 30 seconds before stopping it. The silence that followed was crushing. "How long?" he asked, his voice still that terrifying monotone. 6 months, Amara heard herself answer, the truth spilling out because there was no point in lying now. 6 months. "In our bed. In our home." "Yes." Dae-jung stood slowly, moving toward her with measured steps. Amara flinched, expecting violence, expecting the rage she knew she deserved. But he didn't raise his hand, didn't touch her at all. He simply stood over her, this beautiful black woman who had betrayed him so completely, and asked the question that was destroying him from the inside. "Why?" His voice cracked on the word. "I gave you everything. Mansions, jewelry, credit cards with no limits. Anything you wanted, you had. What does he have that I don't?" And for the first time in 5 years of performed marriage, of playing the obedient wife, of smiling when she was dying inside, Amara told her husband the raw, unfiltered truth. "He sees me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You possess me. You own me. You display me like I'm a piece of art in your collection of expensive things. But Min-jae, he sees me. He asks what I think. He cares what I feel. He treats me like I'm human, not like I'm just another trophy you won." The words hit Dae-jung harder than any bullet ever had. He stumbled backward as if physically struck, his face contorting with pain he couldn't hide anymore. "I am human, Dae-jung," Amara continued, 5 years of suppressed anguish pouring out in a flood. "I'm a black woman with thoughts and dreams and feelings, not a decoration for your arm at charity galas. You've never asked me how my day was, never asked what I wanted out of life. You've never even asked what my favorite color is. Do you even know? Do you know anything about me beyond my measurements for expensive dresses?" Dae-jung had no answer, because she was right. Devastatingly, completely right. "Get out of my sight," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Go to your room. Don't leave it. Don't communicate with anyone. You're a prisoner now, officially, not just emotionally." Amara was escorted to one of the upstairs bedrooms, not the master suite they had shared, but a smaller guest room that was now her cell. 2 guards were posted outside the door with orders to prevent any communication with the outside world. This sophisticated black woman, who had lived in golden cages her entire marriage, was now in a literal prison, stripped of even the illusion of freedom she'd once possessed. News of the betrayal spread through the Beko organization like wildfire. In the criminal underworld, secrets are impossible to keep. By the next morning, every soldier, every associate, every person connected to the organization knew that the chief's wife had betrayed him with his own right-hand man. The reaction was immediate and fractured. The hardliners, old-school gangsters who had built their lives on the traditional code, demanded immediate public execution of both traitors. It was the only way to restore honor, they argued. The only way to show that the Beko still followed the sacred laws that separated them from common criminals. A chief who couldn't execute his wife's lover and his traitorous brother was a chief too weak to lead. But a smaller faction, mostly younger members and veterans who had served alongside Minje for years, whispered different thoughts in dark corners. They had all seen how Daejung treated Amara, like an expensive possession, like exotic decoration, like a beautiful black trophy to be displayed but never truly valued. They had witnessed 15 years of a marriage that was business transaction, not love. Could they really blame the woman for seeking genuine human connection? Could they really blame Minje for seeing her humanity when their chief never had? The cracks in the organization began to show. Arguments broke out in meetings. Factions formed. The unity that had made the Beko so powerful was fracturing, and everyone knew it. Outside enemies sensed the weakness immediately. The Chung family, a rival Korean mafia that had always envied Beko's territories, made aggressive moves on several key businesses. They attacked shipment routes, intimidated suppliers, began recruiting Beko soldiers with promises of better leadership. The message was clear. Daejung was distracted, emotional, weak. Now was the time to strike. Revenue streams began to dry up. Suppliers questioned long-standing agreements. Partners started hedging their bets, reaching out to competitors. The empire Daejung had built over 2 decades was showing fissures, and every day of indecision made those cracks wider. In the basement, Minje rotted in chains. But he didn't beg for mercy. He accepted his fate with the resignation of a man who knew he'd signed his own death warrant the moment he touched Amara. The physical discomfort of the cold concrete floor, the hunger, the humiliation. None of it compared to the emotional agony of having betrayed his blood brother. On the 3rd night of his imprisonment, Daejung finally descended the stairs to confront him. Alone. No guards, no witnesses. Just 2 brothers who had survived hell together, now facing each other across an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal. Minje looked up from where he sat, chained to the wall, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. "You should have killed me already, Hyung. Keeping me alive is making you look weak." "I know," Daejung said quietly. He pulled up a metal chair and sat facing his former brother, studying the man he'd trusted more than anyone in the world. "Then why haven't you?" "Because I need to understand." Daejung's voice cracked. 15 years, Minje. 15 years we've been brothers. I would have died for you. I would have killed anyone who touched you. And you betrayed me with my own wife. In my own bed. Why? Just tell me why." Minje was silent for a long moment, then looked his chief directly in the eyes.
Because I loved her. Love her. Present tense. I can't stop, even knowing I'm going to die for it. Love. Daejung repeated bitterly. You destroyed everything for love. She was drowning, Hyung. Min-jae's voice was steady, unflinching. Every single day, I watched that incredible black woman drown in loneliness while you treated her like furniture. She cried every night. Did you know that? Every single night after those formal dinners where you paraded her around like an exotic pet, she went to bed and cried herself to sleep. Daejung flinched as if struck. You never touched her with affection. Min-jae continued, the words pouring out like confession. Never asked about her day, her dreams, her fears. You gave her diamonds, but never gave her your time. You bought her designer clothes, but never asked her favorite color. You treated this sophisticated, educated, beautiful black woman like she was just another acquisition in your collection of expensive things. I saw her as human. I saw her pain. And yes, I deserved to die for what I did. But Hyung, you created this. You pushed her into my arms by never seeing her at all. The words landed like physical blows. Daejung stood abruptly, his chair scraping against concrete, rage and anguish warring on his face. He wanted to scream, to hit something, to deny everything Min-jae had said. But he couldn't. Because deep down, in the parts of himself he'd spent a lifetime avoiding, he knew it was true. He left the basement without firing a shot, but Min-jae's words followed him like ghosts. Upstairs, Amara had reached her breaking point. 5 years of performing strength, of maintaining elegant composure, of swallowing her humanity to play the perfect wife. It all collapsed under the weight of discovery and imprisonment. In the guest room that had become her cell, she found a mirror and shattered it with shaking hands. The guards outside heard the crash but didn't enter. They had orders to keep her locked in, not to monitor her every move. With a shard of broken glass, this sophisticated black woman who had graced magazine covers and charity galas made cuts across her wrists. Not deep enough to kill immediately, but deep enough to bleed, deep enough to escape. Because living as an object, as a possession, as something less than human, that was a death sentence too, just slower and more painful. She was found by Maria, the housekeeper who had worked in the mansion for years and had always shown Amara small kindnesses that no one else did. Maria's scream brought the guards running, brought medical help, brought chaos to the mansion. When Daejung was informed that his wife had attempted suicide, something fundamental shifted inside him. He rushed to the room where doctors were bandaging Amara's wrists, where this beautiful black woman lay pale and barely conscious on white sheets stained with her blood. For the first time in decades, since he was a child, maybe since his mother died, Kang Daejung wept. Not tears of rage or frustration, but tears of devastating realization. He was losing both of them. Not to their betrayal, but to his own. His betrayal of treating love as transaction, of confusing possession with partnership, of never seeing the humanity in the woman he'd married. He sat by Amara's bedside that night, holding her bandaged hand, staring at this black woman who had been willing to die rather than continue existing as his property. And for the first time, he asked himself the question he'd spent 38 years avoiding. What kind of man had he become? What kind of monster treats the people he claims to care about as objects to be owned and controlled? The supreme chief of the Beko organization, the man feared across 3 states, sat in the darkness and confronted the truth he'd been running from his entire life. The betrayal hurt. God, it hurt worse than anything he'd ever experienced. But maybe,
just maybe, he had created the conditions for that betrayal. Maybe he was the architect of his own destruction. By morning, Dae-jung had made his decision. It was time to call a final meeting of the organization. Time to face his men. Time to choose between the easy path of violence and revenge or the impossible path of confronting his own failures. The conference room filled once more with all the captains and top-ranking members of the Beko. They expected execution, expected blood, expected their chief to finally restore order through the only language the criminal world truly understood: death.